Throughout the medieval and Renaissance periods, several rulers demonstrated extreme psychological instability, manifesting in mass killings, royal executions, and delusions of literally being made of fragile glass. In this episode, we'll look at 4 striking cases of royal madness in history. Charles VI of France is remembered by history as Charles the Mad, and his reign offers one of the most dramatic examples of royal mental illness. Ironically, Charles VI began his reign as Charles the Beloved. He became king in 1380 at only 11 years old and was initially a popular, well-regarded monarch. In his early 20s, Charles asserted independence from his regents and brought in competent advisors who stabilized the kingdom. For a few years, France prospered under his personal rule. In the summer of 1392, Charles suffered his first major bout of insanity. While leading an army through a forest, he suddenly drew his sword and attacked his own escort, killing at least one knight and several other men. After the fit passed, Charles fell into a coma-like state and had to be carried back to safety. It was the beginning of a lifelong pattern of terrifying mental collapse. One of the most haunting episodes of his early decline came in 1393 at a court celebration now known as the Ball of the Burning Men. During a masquerade ball held in a Paris palace, Charles and several courtiers dressed up in flammable costumes meant to resemble wild men of the woods. As the dancing began, a torch brought too close to the group ignited their outfits. The fire spread quickly. 4 men were burned alive before the eyes of the court. The king was saved by a quick-thinking duchess who shielded him with her gown, but the trauma left a deep mark on both his psyche and public perception. Many saw the event as a grim omen of instability, both for the king and the kingdom. Over the next 3 decades, Charles alternated between clear-minded leadership and delusional behavior. He sometimes forgot his own name, failed to recognize his wife and children, and insisted he was not king at all. He occasionally believed he was the biblical hero St. George, adopting new coats of arms and issuing commands as if he were a religious martyr. He also refused to bathe or change clothes for months. His wildest delusion was the belief that his body was made of glass. Terrified that he might shatter, he wore reinforced clothing with iron rods sewn into the seams. He even refused to let people touch him. With the king mentally unfit, rival factions vied for control. His brother Louis of Orléans and his cousin John the Fearless fought bitterly for influence. Their rivalry turned violent, triggering civil war. England moved to capitalize on France's internal divisions. In 1415, Henry V crushingly defeated French forces at Agincourt, dealing a serious blow to the French nobility. With Charles increasingly unfit to rule, the Treaty of Troyes was signed in 1420, naming Henry as successor and excluding Charles's own son. Henry subsequently married Charles' daughter Catherine. When both Henry V and Charles VI died in 1422, the French crown passed to Henry's infant son. Today, Charles VI is often cited as a textbook example of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, and he remains the only French king remembered primarily for having lost his mind. Over his long reign, Ivan IV combined extraordinary intelligence with an escalating tendency toward cruelty and paranoia. He founded the Russian Tsardom, reformed law, and expanded the empire, and also oversaw mass executions, state terror, and the murder of his own son. His legacy is one of both empire building and horror, and rightly earned him his well-known name, Ivan the Terrible. Ivan's childhood was defined by trauma. His father died when he was 3, and his mother was likely poisoned when he was 8. In the absence of parental guidance, rival families fought for control and neglected the young heir. Ivan later described being humiliated, starved, and ignored in the royal palace. At age 13, he ordered one of the noble leaders thrown to a pack of hunting dogs, the first public sign of the violent ruler he would become. When Ivan was crowned Tsar in 1547, he appeared reform-minded. He codified laws, restructured government, created a standing army, and conquered major territories. But personal tragedies fractured his mind. The death of his beloved wife, Anastasia, in 1560 devastated him. He suspected she was poisoned and began to see treason everywhere. In 1565, Ivan abdicated, then dramatically returned to power under new conditions. He created the Oprichnina, a separate state within Russia, under his absolute control. His black-clad secret police, the Oprichniki, enforced his will with torture and execution. They carried dog heads and brooms to symbolize sniffing out and sweeping away traitors. Over 7 years, Ivan unleashed a wave of terror against nobles, clergy, and commoners alike. Entire families were exterminated, estates were seized, priests were murdered in their churches. The most infamous event of Ivan's reign was the massacre of Novgorod in 1570. Convinced the city was plotting treason, Ivan led a brutal purge. Thousands of men, women, and children were killed. Victims were drowned in frozen rivers, burned alive, or cut down by the sword. Witnesses describe blood flowing through the streets. Ivan observed the massacre personally, sometimes giving orders in person. In 1581, Ivan's madness reached its peak. During an argument with his son and heir, Ivan struck him with his staff, killing him. By doing so, Ivan had destroyed the one person capable of continuing his dynasty. When Ivan died 3 years later, Russia entered a succession crisis and spiraled into the time of troubles, during which famine and war claimed millions of lives as desperate Russians turned to cannibalism. Henry VIII is often remembered as a bloated, red-faced tyrant who discarded wives and chopped off heads with impunity. But he wasn't always like that. In his youth, Henry was considered the ideal Renaissance monarch, athletic, cultured, charismatic, and genuinely beloved by his people. He wrote music and poetry, excelled at jousting and hunting, and was regarded as a generous gentleman. Yet over the nearly 4 decades of his reign, this golden prince became a volatile, cruel man. The transformation was so dramatic that modern scholars have combed through his life for an explanation. Was it illness, injury, a personality disorder? A pivotal moment in Henry's decline occurred in January 1536. The 44-year-old king suffered a severe jousting accident. He was thrown from his armored horse and knocked unconscious for 2 hours. After this trauma, Henry became prone to unpredictable rages and memory problems. Indeed, within months, Henry's behavior took a dark turn. In May 1536, he suddenly ordered the execution of his second wife, Anne Boleyn, on dubious charges of adultery and treason. Not long after, he had one of his chief ministers, Thomas Cromwell, executed, despite Cromwell's years of loyal service. Over the next decade, Henry's paranoia and capacity for cruelty only intensified. He developed a famously explosive temper. Even close advisors and former friends were executed for minor offenses. The king saw betrayal everywhere. Courtiers whispered that no person's head was safe on his shoulders if Henry took a dislike to them. His fifth wife, Catherine Howard, was a teenager when they married. When rumors of her infidelity reached him, Henry flew into a rage. Catherine was arrested and eventually beheaded in 1542, making her the second queen that Henry sent to the chopping block. Physically and mentally, the once vigorous king deteriorated in these years. The jousting injury had left Henry with permanent wounds on his leg that never properly healed. He lived in chronic pain, could hardly mount a horse, and rapidly gained weight. By his late 40s, he was morbidly obese. The combination of constant pain, limited mobility, and incessant political stress likely fed his foul moods. Henry himself seemed aware of his decline. In his final years, he became melancholic at times, and his servants noted moments of deep regret and depression. But the paranoia never left him. Even on his deathbed in 1547, Henry VIII was ordering last-minute executions. In the early 1500s, King Christian II of Denmark aspired to unify the Scandinavian kingdoms under his rule. Initially a capable ruler who introduced legal reforms and curbed noble privilege, Christian's reign soon took a dark turn. He earned the nickname Christian the Tyrant in Sweden, a hint of the brutality to come. His paranoia and cruelty manifested early. In 1517, his beloved mistress died suddenly, and Christian suspected a nobleman, Torben Ox, of poisoning her. Defying legal custom, the king had Ox tried by a common jury and executed. This unlawful vengeance, driven by personal grief and suspicion, outraged Denmark's aristocrats. In November 1520, following a victorious war, he was crowned King of Sweden, only to soon betray the nobles who had welcomed him. Just days after the coronation festivities, after feasting, drinking, and dancing with Stockholm's aristocracy, the guests were summoned once more to the great hall of the royal castle. The doors were shut behind them, no one was allowed to leave. Then Christian entered and took his seat on the throne. What followed would be remembered as the Stockholm Bloodbath. Under the pretense of a religious court, Christian initiated a politically motivated heresy trial and condemned 82 Swedish nobles, bishops, and officials. Many were swiftly beheaded, and eyewitnesses reported that the blood flowed through the streets of Stockholm. The victims included many who had actually supported him. Christian's suspicious nature led him to even execute some of his own allies. The gruesome massacre, carried out in the center of Stockholm, horrified all of Scandinavia. Ever since, Swedes have remembered him as Christian the Tyrant, a ruler whose paranoia and brutality marked him as monstrously mad in their national memory. By 1523, just 3 years later, the outraged Swedes, led by Gustav Vasa, rose up and drove Christian from the Swedish throne. Back in Denmark, Christian's tyranny proved equally untenable. The Danish nobility rebelled, and in 1523 they forced Christian to abdicate in favor of his uncle, Frederick I. The dethroned king fled into exile, but his story did not end there. In 1531, in an ambitious attempt to reclaim his crown, Christian returned with a mercenary army. He made some initial progress with his forces, but before long he was defeated and tricked by a false guarantee of safety from the new king of Denmark. Upon his arrival in Copenhagen, Christian was captured and spent the rest of his life in imprisonment, mostly confined to Sunderborg Castle on a Danish isle. If you found this video insightful, consider subscribing to stay informed about our upcoming releases. Further reading and sources are available in the description. Feel free to leave a comment and let us know what topics you'd like to see covered in future videos. See you next time.